He never showed his face. He never gave his name. But for years, he held an entire state hostage with nothing more than a pen, a cipher, and an absolute certainty that no one would ever catch him. In 1969, a serial killer began mailing encrypted messages to newspapers across California, taunting police, mocking investigators, and daring the public to figure out who he was. He called himself the Zodiac. He claimed to have murdered 37 people. And for more than 50 years, one of his coded messages sat unbroken, a locked door to the darkest corner of American criminal history. When a team of code breakers finally cracked it in 2020, what they found inside didn't give the world closure. It only made the mystery deeper. Because the Zodiac was never caught, and somewhere in the silence of an ordinary American life, he may have simply disappeared. To understand how this happened, how one man paralyzed an entire generation, you have to go back to the late 1960s. Northern California was a world caught between hope and chaos. The summer of love had come and gone. Vietnam was bleeding the country dry, and in the quiet suburban towns around San Francisco Bay, people were beginning to feel something they hadn't felt in years. A low, creeping sense that the world outside their front door was no longer safe. It started on a cold December night in 1968. A rural 2-lane road outside Benicia, California, Lake Herman Road. Two teenagers, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, were parked in a lot near a pumping station, the kind of secluded spot teenagers had used for decades without incident. They would never leave that parking lot alive. A lone gunman approached the car and opened fire. David was shot in the head at close range. Betty Lou ran. She didn't get far. She was shot 5 times in the back before she collapsed in the gravel, just 30 feet from the car. No witnesses, no motive, no suspect. The sheriff's department was baffled. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing had been taken. The attack was precise, controlled, almost clinical. The killer had walked up to 2 completely random strangers and executed them without hesitation. Then he had simply vanished into the dark. But what happened next terrified investigators even more. 6 months later, on July 4th, 1969, Independence Day, the killer struck again. This time at Blue Rock Springs Park, just 3 miles from the first crime scene. Darlene Farron and Mike Mageau had parked there late at night when a car pulled up beside them. The driver sat quietly for a few moments. Then he left. Then he came back, and when he returned, he got out of his vehicle, walked to their car, and opened fire with a 9mm pistol. Mike Mageau survived, barely. He would later describe his attacker as a stocky white male, round-faced, with light brown curly hair. That description would be one of the few physical accounts investigators would ever get. But here's what made investigators go cold. Darlene Farron had been terrified of someone watching her in the weeks before her death. She had told friends there was Amen who kept showing up. She refused to say who he was. She took that Namito her grave. About an hour after the shooting, a man called the Vallejo Police Department. His voice was calm, unnervingly calm. He gave the location of the bodies and told police he wanted to report a double murder. Then, almost as an afterthought, he said he was also responsible for the Lake Herman Road killings. Then he hung up. The Zodiac had introduced himself. 1 month later, on August 1st, 1969, 3 letters arrived simultaneously. One to the San Francisco Chronicle, 1 to the San Francisco Examiner, and 1 to the Vallejo Times-Herald. Each letter contained 1/3 of a 408-symbol cryptogram. The killer demanded the newspapers print his ciphers on their front pages, or he would go on a killing spree. Each letter also included details about the murders that only the killer or police could have known. These were Nothoaxes. The Zodiac was real, and he was writing to the world. The newspapers printed the ciphers. The public went into a frenzy. Within days, a Salina schoolteacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty cracked the code. What they found inside was not a name, not an address, not a confession. It was a window into a mind that operated on a completely different level of darkness. The killer wrote that he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. That killing gave him thrills, that the more victims he had, the more powerful he would become in death. He ended by saying he would not give his name because it would slow down the slave collecting. And then the killer sent another message. In a letter dated August 7th, 1969, the killer used the name Zodiac for the first time. He taunted police. He gave more details. He was clearly enjoying this, the attention, the fear, the public spectacle of his own anonymity. He was performing, and the audience was all of California. Then, on September 27th, 1969, the Zodiac escalated in a way that shocked even hardened investigators. He attacked in broad daylight at Lake Berryessa, a popular recreation area about an hour north of San Francisco. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were college students from Pacific Union College, just a couple enjoying a Saturday afternoon by the water. A stocky man approached them wearing a black executioner-style hood, square, with a bib that hung down his chest. On the bib was a symbol, a circle bisected by a cross, the crosshairs of a gun sight, his own personal logo. He tied them both up with pre-cut lengths of rope. He had come prepared and told them calmly that he needed their car to get to Mexico because he had killed a guard while escaping from prison. Then he stabbed them. Cecilia was stabbed 10 times, Brian 6. Before leaving, the Zodiac walked to Brian's car door and wrote the dates of his previous murders, and that day's date in black marker. Then he called the police himself from a payphone. Brian Hartnell survived. Cecilia Shepard did not. The investigators who arrived at the scene were struck by one detail above all others. The killer had been completely calm throughout the entire attack. Methodical, patient, almost peaceful. But the most disturbing part was still to come. 2 weeks later, on October 11th, 1969, a San Francisco taxi driver named Paul Stein picked up a fare in Union Square. By the time the cab reached the intersection, of Washington and Cherry Street in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. Paul Stine was dead, shot once in the head at point-blank range. The Zodiac took a piece of Stine's shirt. He would later mail swatches of that shirt to newspapers as proof. 2 witnesses saw a man flee the scene. The police dispatcher accidentally radioed that officers should look for a black male suspect when witnesses had described a white man. The Zodiac walked right past 2 police officers in the dark. He escaped. He then mailed a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside it was a piece of Paul Stine's bloody shirt and a threat. He wrote that he planned to attack a school bus and shoot the tires, then pick off the children as they scrambled out. He described it with the casual tone of someone discussing a weekend errand. The terror that spread through California after that letter was immediate and absolute. Schools changed their routes. Drivers were given police escorts. Parents pulled children from school buses altogether. In cities across the Bay Area, people began carrying firearms. Gun shops reported record sales. Neighborhoods that had never locked their doors at night now bolted them. Women reported strangers following them and immediately called police. Every stocky, round-faced man in California became a suspect in someone's mind. The Zodiac had not just killed people. He had infected an entire society with fear, and through all of it, the letters kept coming. Over the following months and years, the Zodiac mailed more than 20 letters to police and newspapers. Some contained ciphers. Some contained threats. Some contained clues that went nowhere. He claimed the score was Zodiac 10, Police 0. He claimed he was the Phantom of the Opera. He complained when the newspapers didn't give him enough front-page coverage. He threatened to kill again if they stopped printing his letters. He sent a letter with a piece of a victim's shirt as a greeting card. He seemed to feed on the attention the way most people breathe, automatically, insatiably, without end. Investigators were overwhelmed. The Zodiac's witness descriptions contradicted each other. A composite sketch produced from the Stine murder didn't quite match the description given by the Berryessa survivor. His M.O. shifted constantly. He used different weapons, different locations, different times of day. He seemed to deliberately vary his behavior to prevent profiling. Hundreds of tips flooded police departments. Thousands of suspects were investigated, and the FBI, when they eventually became involved, could only confirm what local investigators already feared. This was a case unlike any they had seen before. The most famous suspect was a man named Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester with a deeply troubling background. He had been named by his own friends as a possible Zodiac. He owned a Zodiac brand watch with the crosshair symbol. Handwriting analysts studied his letters. His home was searched, but no physical evidence ever conclusively tied him to the crimes. Headied in 1992, his guilt unproven. His name forever associated with one of the most disturbing cases in American history. Dozens of other names have been floated over the decades. None has ever been confirmed. Then came 2020. and a breakthrough that the world had been waiting 50 years for. A team of 3 amateur codebreakers, David Oranchak, a web designer from Virginia, Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian programmer, and Sam Blake, an Australian mathematician, applied modern computational techniques to the Zodiac's second cipher, known as the 340-character cipher, named for its number of symbols. It had resisted every attempt to crack it since it arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle in November of 1969. For half a century, it sat there, waiting. When they finally broke it, the message that emerged was chilling in its tone, its arrogance, and its ultimate emptiness. The killer wrote about hiding in paradises that death would not be a zero experience, that he hoped people were having lots of fun trying to catch him. He wrote that he was not afraid of the gas chamber because it would send him to paradise even sooner. And then nothing. No name. No location. No face. He had constructed an encrypted message the world spent 50 years trying to read, and when it finally opened, he still wasn't in it. The Zodiac had won again. The FBI officially acknowledged the decryption, but the case remains open, unsolved. The identity of the Zodiac Killer is still officially unknown, and yet the obsession has never faded. If anything, it has grown. Online communities on Reddit and dedicated forums have spent years dissecting every letter, every cipher, every comma. Amateur investigators have built timelines, mapped movements, analyzed handwriting samples, and cross-referenced tax records. New books come out every year. New documentary series. New theories. The Zodiac has become a cultural phenomenon, a modern myth, the ghost in the machine of American true crime. He has inspired films, novels, songs, and entire careers built around the single impossible question he left behind. Who was he? Was he Arthur Lee Allen? Was he someone who died quietly decades ago, never named, never caught? Was he someone who is still alive today, old now, maybe frail, sitting in some room somewhere in America, watching the news coverage about himself, with something that looks almost like satisfaction? The Zodiac's last confirmed communication came in 1974, a letter to the Chronicle referencing a film. After that, silence. He claimed 37 victims. Investigators can only confirm 5 murders and 2 non-fatal attacks. Did he stop? Did he move? Did he change his name and reinvent himself so completely that the world simply walked past him for decades without knowing? There is something uniquely terrifying about this case. Something that goes beyond the murders themselves. It is the idea that a man can reach into the fabric of a society, tear a hole in it, and then simply step through to the other side. That someone can be this close to being caught, can shake hands with investigators, can walk past police officers in the dark, can mail letters with his own fingerprints on them, and still disappear completely into ordinary life. The Zodiac wasn't a monster who looked like a monster. He looked like your neighbor, your coworker, the man at the gas station, the father at the school pickup line. He could have been anyone, and that is the thought that lingers longest after everything else fades. Not the ciphers, not the body count, not the hood with the crosshairs drawn on it. It's the thought that somewhere in America, the man who called himself the Zodiac may have grown old and gray, may have watched decades of news coverage about himself from the comfort of a recliner, may have read every book written about the case with a quiet, private smile, and no one around him ever knew, because he didn't look like a killer. He looked just like everybody else. And the question that no cipher, no investigation, no documentary, and no amount of time has ever been able to answer is this: is he still out there? Or did he die with his secret locked inside him? The one code that will never be broken.